Greetings and welcome, my friend, to the next episode of the Red Delta Project podcast. Your humble host, as always, Matt Chevrolet, with another episode, help you be fit and live free. And today we are discussing the nuances on training volume, trying to put the cool water on the fire of debate out there, where a lot of people are like, oh, you need a lot of volume in order to build muscle, and you can't build much muscle with low training volume, even if intensity is high. I can almost guarantee you that I'm going to be getting questions here on the Q&A on like, what do you think of like Mike Metzer and Dorian Yates's programs, One Set to Failure and all that sort of thing. And there's a lot of runaround that this causes a lot of people to do that ultimately is largely just a waste of time, because even though you kind of get caught between the high volume and the low volume ideals and the programs and stuff, neither of which is ultimately determining whether or not you can successfully build and maintain muscle either. Because yes, volume is absolutely an important part of building muscle, but it's not the be all end all to the entire process. It's just one piece of the puzzle. And if we hyperfixate on one thing, then you have very limited power and influence over the process to even get results in the first place. And you're possibly ignoring a lot of other things that are just as, if not more important, because you've got all of your eggs in that one basket. So here's the way that we want to look at things, is that on one side of the coin, when it comes to training volume, scientific research has yet to find an upper limit to how much volume equates more muscle growth. So to put it simply, the more volume you have, the more muscle growth you can expect. More is just better in the terms of making gains. There is theoretically no such thing as junk volume. You put in more volume, you're going to get more out of it. It's that simple. So on the surface, it sounds like, okay, you need a lot of volume. I should be doing as much volume as possible, or at least a very hefty amount of volume in order to get what I want out of my training, right? And in some cases, that is true. If you're especially going after the utmost amount of your muscular potential for being a professional athlete, or you're really trying to just see how far you can go for the sake of stepping on stage, if you're in a phase of your fitness career where you're like, yeah, I want to just see how much I can possibly get, then yes, take on as much volume as you can possibly allow on your body, mind, and lifestyle in order to make that happen. But the thing we need to realize is that very few people are interested in the best possible results. I know that sounds a little bit funny, but for the majority of us, the optimal or maximal results are not going to work in our favor. And this is because optimization is extremely expensive and very, very, very stressful. It's like saying, okay, if you want to have a reliable form of transportation, you need a solid gold Rolls Royce to drive to work every day. It's like, no, that's not going to work for most people. Even if someone can afford that, it's just not going to be worthwhile, because that's the key word here, my friend, is that we are often motivated not for what's most effective, but what is most worthwhile. And that is determined not just by how much benefit we can get from our habits, but what is the cost associated with those benefits. And make no mistake about it, when we go chasing after high amounts of volume, costs increase exponentially. They get really, really high. They're much more stressful on your body, much more stressful on your mind, and harder on your lifestyle, especially from just a time standpoint, from a standpoint of scheduling your workouts. So while we look at it and you say, well, more volume is more benefit, yes, but it's also more cost. And the amount of perceived cost goes up with every workout set and rep that you do. Because if you go from one workout a week, or you're working a muscle once a week, to twice a week, that's 100% increase in volume. But it's like, well, it's just one more workout. It may not be that hard to do. So you add another one and another one, another one. And before you know it, when you go from working a muscle group 3 times a week to 4 times a week, that's when things can start to get a little off the rails. Like, man, my knees are just killing me lately. Or it's harder to schedule the workouts in with your schedule, with everything else you've got going on. Your energy level starts dropping down and all these other sorts of things. This is what we run into with the reality of high maintenance diet and exercise habits, is that even though the high maintenance habits like buying a solid gold Rolls Royce can technically work, they're not worthwhile for most people. And that's what's really important, because we follow worthwhile habits. It doesn't matter if it's the most effective. It only matters if going to that level is worthwhile for you. And for the vast majority of us, it isn't. Yes, if you're stepping on stage, it may be worthwhile. Yes, if you're getting paid a lot of money to be at your absolute utmost of your performance as an athlete, it may be worthwhile for sure. But for the average Joe, like myself, that sure as hell isn't going to be worthwhile. It's going to be far more cost for a negligible benefit. Technically, there is a benefit, but you might say, yeah, but why do that? Why spend twice the work for a benefit or an amount of muscle growth that you may not even notice most of the time? And so that's what we want to be paying attention to, is not so much, okay, more volume equals more gain, but how much volume is going to produce the most worthwhile benefit. And sometimes more volume's better, sometimes it's less. And that's what we want to really actually recognize, is that just heaping on more volume endlessly is not worthwhile in most cases, because that's going to drop down your motivation like crazy, and why your long-term benefits or results can be compromised. And that's why the title of today's episode is More Volume Does Equal More Gains, but it can be worse results, because you can have a ton of volume. Let's say you're training a muscle group for 30 sets a week, and that's a good amount of volume, very high. But after 5, 6 weeks, a couple of months, joints are achy, you're burning yourself out, you're not really pushing yourself all that hard, your intensity is getting watered down, you're finding yourself just kind of going to the gym without much enthusiasm. You got to have 5 scoops of pre-workout just to get amped up to get through the workout. At some point, it's like, yeah, but this isn't worth it. And that's where training consistency, training intensity, and overall training focus on it, as far as a priority in your life, drops down, as well it should, because you're losing motivation to do it. And when you lose motivation, everything starts circling the drain. Your intensity drops off, your focus drops off, your consistency drops off, and the long-term result is, well, worse results. So in a kind of convoluted way, it actually compromises your consistency of that volume. So what can you do here with this type of realization? That more volume isn't always better, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it plays around. Well, that's partially why the two-set style of training in the Beautiful Strength program exists, is because you're employing 2 hard work sets, pushing close to failure on each set, in each exercise that you do. And you adjust the volume in the program by how many exercises you have, not just multiple sets per exercise, because you have a diminishing rate of return too on each exercise. So if you were to do, for example, 6 sets of pull-ups, then you're working your pull chain for 6 sets. But if you did 2 sets of pull-ups and 2 sets of rows and 2 sets of, let's say, bicep curls and rear flies or something, you're still getting overall roughly the same amount of volume for your pull chain. But now, because you have 2 hard work sets, you can pour a ton of volume, or not volume, but intensity into each of those sets. So you don't compromise either of those things, because that's the other side of the high volume approach, is you basically pace yourself in your training. And the evidence has very heavily shown that it's pushing yourself close to failure, getting through those hard reps, that is the biggest predictor of your stimulus for muscle growth. And if you've got a lot of volume, it's kind of like going out for a jog and you're like, I'm going to run 20 miles. You don't sprint out of the gate. You just start at a nice, easy, lollygagging pace, and you eventually just kind of fatigue yourself through the volume, but you never really work with much intensity. And without much intensity, the volume can still have a watered down stimulus to the point where you're doing a lot of work, but you're really not making a whole lot happen, because we need both volume and intensity. And that's why the 2 hard work sets in Beautiful Strength work, because you don't have to compromise your intensity. You've got 2 shots to really drive home a lot of effort in each exercise, And then you have volume through extra exercises. Plus, you get a much broader training stimulus as well, where it's like, okay, 2 sets of rows, 2 sets of curls, 2 sets of pull ups and stuff. You're still working the same muscles, but you're not just, okay, another set of this and another set of this and another set of this. And you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. And you never really push into that red zone, into those hard reps on any of those sets, because you're always like, yeah, whatever, I can always do it more harder on the next set. And then comes set 5, 6, or 7. Now you're like, yeah, I'm kind of tired. I don't feel like pushing myself all that hard. So you've never really pushed your muscles close to failure. So you did all that volume without much intensity as far as getting close to failure. But when you have 2 sets per exercise, you know you've got to push it. I call it the pressure cooker effect, where you've got to drive yourself hard because you've got 2 chances to make something happen on those pull-ups. And then once that's it, that's it. You cut yourself off. And then you got 2 sets on the rows, 2 sets on the curls, and so on. And that way you have both. So that's a good place to start off. And then you can adjust the volume based on how many exercises you do, not just how many sets. The other thing that you can do with this is to add volume to your training when you're feeling like, okay, I want to spur a little bit more muscle growth, break out of the plateau that I may be in, just to give myself a little bit more, but you're not going to do it indefinitely. And this is where a lot of high volume stuff kind of screws us over, is this approach of I'm going to ramp things up in my training, and I'm just going to ramp up and stay ramped up indefinitely. This is one of the things that burns us out, is where we will start out of the gate at a really hard intensity level or a sprint, a lot of effort, and be like, this is great. I'm actually making some progress here. But inevitably, you're going to start to pace yourself. You start to slow down. And if you were to run a marathon and you started off in a dead sprint, yeah, for that first mile, maybe you were like, I am flying. This is great. But you start to get tired. You start to fatigue. And then you slow down to a slower run and then a jog. And then you end up being one of those folks who's, on mile 15 and you're barely above a walking pace. And at that point, you're still pushing as hard as you can because you're so tired, but you're barely making any progress. And this is why always trying to push yourself as hard as possible results in burnout, but also such a slow pace, is because you started off fast, but inevitably things start to slow down in order to just be manageable and something you can maintain. So you start pacing yourself, and now you're working as hard as you can, even though you're going at a very slow pace. So that's why it's much smarter to kind of go in a bit of a periodized plan, which is what the new version of Beautiful Strength I'm working on is going to be implementing, where, okay, I'm going to take something and I'm going to go really hard on this for a block, a macro cycle or a mesocycle, as they call it, where a block of training will involve going really heavy or for higher endurance or higher volume or whatever. And you're like, I'm going to do this for a month or 6 weeks. But at the end of that, I'm going to stop doing that and return back to a bit of a baseline. So this is kind of like starting off in the marathon where you're at a manageable pace and you're going, but you keep a little bit in the tank. And then at key points, you say, okay, now I'm going to go hard for the next mile. And you book it. And it's really hard and it's really intense, but it's also a lot easier to work at a higher intensity because I only need to do this for the next mile, metaphorically speaking. And once that's done, then you come back. It's the same reason why calorie hacking works for fat loss, because indefinitely trying to lose weight on a very strict and restrictive diet is exhausting, and it's compounding effort over time. So sure, you can lose weight for the first few weeks or even a couple of months, but then you start to pace yourself, you get back into homeostasis, you're not losing weight, and now you're dieting as hard as you can for no further progress. And naturally, of course, that's going to kill your motivation, because you're like, dude, I'm working as hard as I can. I'm not getting anything out of this. Why bother with it? As you should absolutely be questioning whether or not you should give up on that, because your motivation is built to only follow worthwhile habits. And habits that require a lot of work with very little return are not going to be worthwhile. So you absolutely should be quitting them, for sure. And so when we have more of a sprint approach where it's like, I'm going to, instead of 2 exercises per workout, I'm going to do, or 4 sets per exercise, I'm going to do 4 sets. And I'm going to do it for a month. I'm going to do 4 sets per exercise. I'm going to blast for it, and then I'm going to go back to 2. And that way you can regulate things a little bit. That way you can get back to your baseline, and you're going to keep most of the benefits you had during that sprint. When you sprint during a marathon for a mile, and then you go back to your baseline pace, they don't say, oh, you're going back to baseline. You got to go back a mile or half a mile and start again. It's like, no, you've made up ground, and now you can keep moving forward. And it's the same thing. In regards to the workout log in Beautiful Strength, if you decide to do that, you still only track 2 sets though, because the whole point of 2-set training, particularly with the log, is to give you a reference point of 2 numbers that gives you an idea of where you're trying to make progress, whether you're adding weight or reps or technique. So if you do decide to do a block of, say, a month of higher volume, you still only write down 2 numbers. So let's say you're doing pull-ups, and your first number is 10, second number is 8, and because you're pushing close to failure, those last 2 numbers are going to be pretty darn low. They're going to be like 5 and 5, let's say. Do you write those down? No, you only keep the first one because you're still trying to make progress by, you got 10 on the first one, then you try to get 9 reps on the second because you're backfilling. And those other sets that you do, the third and the fourth sets, those are just bonus points. Those are just bonus points that you've thrown in. So you just get whatever you can. You're not doing it for performance. You're not doing it for any other reason than just to get a little bit more volume in, whether you get 3 reps or 6 reps or whatever. It's really not that important. You're still pushing yourself pretty close to failure. Just make sure that you're not pacing yourself on those first 2 sets in order to add repetitions to that one. It may behoove you to get like a drop set at that point. So you get 10 pull-ups, 8 pull-ups, and you're like, okay, I'm pretty well fatigued on that. I'm going to go with a lat pull-down machine, or I'm going to do seated pull-ups or something like that. So it's still the same motion, but now you're just getting a little bit more volume with less, because a lot of the research has shown that it's not so much volume as far as just total amount of exercise, but total amount of hard sets. Because you can get a ton of volume just, bicep curling a pencil, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get very far because, of course, the intensity is not very high. So we always need volume and intensity. And when we're compromising intensity for the sake of volume, then we're basically kind of looking at it like, well, I'm now just trading one form of work for another. And that's how you can work twice as much and basically get the same end result. So make sure that you're still just tracking and pushing yourself to make progress in those first 2 sets. And then the last part that I will say is that always remember that you don't need to use as much volume as possible all the time. You're still creating a stimulus for hypertrophy, even with relatively low amounts of volume, just again, as long as you're pushing yourself close to failure, even if it's literally 1 or 2 sets per tension chain per workout, it's still creating a stimulus. It may not be as much of one, but it's still there and it's still moving the needle forward. And I forget where I saw, it was on a report, one of these ones I get on a newsletter and stuff like that. And it was crazy because they showed like all these things, like, do you want to sleep better? Do you want to have better regulation of appetite, better regulation of hormones, better joint integrity, less burnout, all these things that are usually associated with a negative from training. They're like, if you want to get rid of all these problems that are usually associated with strength training, less volume. So on one hand, we could say, yes, more volume is kind of the low-hanging fruit that anyone can go after when it comes to building more muscle, is adding volume. We'll certainly do it. But on the other hand, almost all of the problems and issues that we run across when it comes to strength training, almost all of those can be mitigated by using less volume. And so that's why the double tap training system in Beautiful Strength exists, is how do we find the most worthwhile volume while still giving you the capacity to add volume if you want it, and potentially even subtract volume when your time, energy, and motivation are at bay. Because like intensity, like range of motion, like any other training variable, volume is one of those things that is very important. However, we will always want to be given the freedom to adjust that variable to our best ability to fit our circumstances. We don't want to just be dogmatic to the ideology of like more is always better or high volume is always better, because sometimes it's not. And especially as a coach, whenever we just get enamored with a particular ideology or an approach, and we're like, this is better, always do it this way, that's when we run the risk of becoming in our own little dogmatic prison. And yeah, that thing that we do, like high volume or low volume or whatever, can be fantastic, but always ask yourself, where's the exception? Because there always is. There's an exception to when high volume is really bad. There's an exception when going to failure can be bad. There's always exceptions. So we want to be aware of those so we know when to use the tools at our disposal and when to say, yeah, that's not really the best tool for this application. We want to use something else in this case. Let's answer some questions here, my friends. OJ and one saying, Matt, are you talking about the kind that resembles Metzger's Yates as heavy duty hit training here? Sometimes, yeah. See what I was talking about earlier. So always remember, we've got the volume and intensity seesaw going on. You can't go with high intensity for a lot of volume. You're just physiologically unable to do so. Nor can you go high volume with high intensity and vice versa. You got to pace yourself. Does it matter either way? Not really, because the stimulus for hypertrophy is whether or not you're challenging your muscular work capacity on a consistent basis. That's, as far as the science shows, what is heavily correlated with hypertrophy and muscle growth. And I say correlated because we still don't have a direct mechanistic understanding of what we do that directly makes muscle grow, which I know kind of sounds a little funny, but it's still one of those things of like, there is no cure for the common cold kind of idea, right? It's like, you kidding me? With all of our knowledge and research and studies, and we have all the AI and everything, we still can't find the answer to this simple thing. It's like, yeah, we don't know how or why we build muscle. All we can do is base it off of correlation. And the research has shown very heavy correlation of pushing your muscles into those hard reps close to failure is the driver for building muscle. We don't know why that's happening. We don't really understand. We keep thinking we understand. Oh, it's metabolic stress, or it's a tearing of the muscle fibers, or damage to the cells, or it's neurological, or it's eliciting a hormone response, or all these things that we've tested throughout the years. And every time we test that one thing, it never pans out. It's like, well, we made this thing happen a lot more, and the subjects didn't build any more muscle. So that's not it. It's not the hormones. It's not the muscle tearing. It's not the damage. It's not metabolic stress. It's not any of this stuff. What is it? We still don't know. But it's like, yeah, but generally, as long as someone's pushing themselves close to failure, as I say, challenging your work capacity, you can do any kind of training you want. You can use any tools, any exercises, as long as you're taking that muscle and really pushing it close to that level of failure. That's as far as our level of knowledge has shown. So can you do it with high intensity, low volume? Absolutely. Can you do it with higher volume, lower intensity? For sure. Can you do it with short range of motion, big range of motion, fast repetition, slow repetition, free weights, machines, lifting small children? There's a million ways you can do it, as long as that muscle is getting challenged to the limits of its capacity. There you go, which is wonderful, because that gives you, my friend, a lot of power and a lot of control to do things your way. If you don't want to do a particular exercise, you don't want to do a particular style of training, don't feel any pressure that you should be doing it, because you don't need it. You don't need high volume. You don't need low volume. You don't need weights. You don't need calisthenics. You just need to make that muscle scream bloody murder a few times on a consistent basis. That's the thing that we need. And so pay attention to what allows you to do that as easily and as effectively as possible. Because that's the thing. Again, it's not about what's most effective. It's about what's most worthwhile. What is the most rewarding for you? That's why, for me, Body weight training is by far a superior muscle builder for me because I get so much more satisfaction from body weight training. I can push my muscles so much harder with body weight training than I could with free weights and machines. I mean, it's not even close in my case. Like I could push myself so much harder on a set of dips than a bench press. Much, much harder. And there's lots of different, there's personal reasons, there's mental reasons, there's all sorts of things, but it doesn't matter what those reasons are. It's just, I can do it. And that's why I do bodyweight training. But if you, my friend, are like, I feel like I can really push my muscles to that level if I use less volume and I really emphasize going to failure, then listen to yourself. Listen to that feedback your body's giving you, because that's telling you what's going to be best for you. And so it could be one way or the other, but do what's best for you. Learn from your experience. And whenever you find individuals in life, in almost anything in life, fitness, relationships, business, stuff, they're always studying themselves. They're always experimenting and saying, what if I did this thing this way? And then they get the feedback and they're like, wow, interesting. So if I do it that way, that seems to produce a much better result for me. Now, you could have 1,000,001 experts saying that shouldn't work. That can't work. No, the science doesn't support. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, bro. I do it that way. I get so much better results. So who do you listen to? You, you listen to you and your feedback. That's what you listen to, because that's ultimately what's going to determine your fate. And that's why RDP is always about empowering you to make your best choices. You should be the number one expert here. Me, the TikTokers, the coaches out there, the podcasts, all that sort of, we're just here to give you ideas and guidance. That's it. We're not in any position to tell you what you should be doing. I have no authority or responsibility to do that whatsoever. You're the one who has to make the call and the choices. And so listening to your feedback will give you the confidence to be able to do that. It also builds up your self-esteem a lot because you're actually in charge. You're not a follower anymore. You're a leader in your own health and fitness. And that's what beautiful strength is largely about too, is that inner strength to be a captain of your own ship, so to speak. That sort of confidence. Because if you look at it, a lot of things, particularly in our fitness culture, are not about giving you control. They're not about giving you empowerment. They're about making you a follower, someone who is obedient to an ideology or a dogma and stuff. And that's not a bad place to start. It's like, okay, I started with this type of diet and I started with this type of program and stuff. Great, good to start there. You don't need to stay there though, because your feedback will tell you how to modify and adjust those things in a way that's best for you. But a lot of times we're encouraged to be followers, not leaders. It's like, well, if you don't follow that plan, you're no longer this type of person. You don't get to have this type of identity and things like that. And to that, I say, fine. It's like, okay, so I wouldn't be vegan anymore, or I wouldn't be a true CrossFitter or true calisthenics or whatever. It's like we love these labels until those labels become a prison. And it's like, okay, fine. So you're a CrossFitter, but you also like doing bicep curls. Does that not make you a CrossFitter? Well, I don't know. Who cares? You like doing bicep curls? Go do bicep curls. Listen to yourself. Do what you want, because this whole fitness thing is entirely open source to begin with anyway. No one is in charge. No one's writing the rules except for the processes of mother and human nature. And the more we align ourselves with those, the more worthwhile your habits are going to be. Cole, thank you very much, Sam. Just want to thank you for talking about invisible attributes that we often don't think or talk about. And this was in a video I posted the other day. The iceberg analogy was perfect. I work with a lot of women and emotional regulation. Yes, so I'll catch you up to speed to those listening. If you haven't seen the video on my YouTube channel that I just posted, basically, when it comes to our health and fitness, remember, RDP is based on the fundamental foundation, the fundamental nature of how fitness really works, which is that your results are governed by the three fundamental processes of mother human nature. You have your process of training, which is creating a stimulus, followed by adaptation, which we just talked about. If you push yourself relatively close to failure, you're creating that stimulus for hypertrophy. Then adaptation is largely on autopilot. You have your process of nutrition and diet, consumption versus expenditure. And then, of course, you have your process of motivation, which is perceived benefits and perceived costs. Those three processes are the things that are in control of your results. And by and large, most of what makes those processes work is completely outside your control. Which, stay with me, I know that sounds bad. I know it sounds scary because we all come to this health and fitness thing because we want control over our health and fitness and how our bodies look. But the fact is, the majority of influences and variables that control your health and fitness, you have no control over whatsoever. But that's okay. That's okay. You're fine. You're perfectly fine with that. Furthermore, your habits, the majority of them that you can control on that process, are still running largely on autopilot in the background of your life anyway. I mean, watch me right now. I'm moving my hands. This is what they call NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is burning calories. This is what the science has shown over and over again, that people who typically burn a lot of calories, it's not because they have a fast metabolism, it's because they just habitually do a lot of movement throughout the day. Like, these are the folks who just can't seem to sit still during a meeting and stuff, where they're always moving and stuff. That subliminal autopilot. And so when you take into account all of the things involved in those processes they have no control over, like your genetics and your age and things like that, the habits that you do practice that, again, you don't have any control or are unaware of, that you largely don't have control over, what we have to realize is that by and large, the influences that we're consciously controlling, like today we're talking about volume, is the very, very tippity toppity micro bit of the iceberg sticking out of the water. As far as how much that actually influences those processes and therefore our results, we have very little control over our health and fitness in the broad picture of things. Very little control, relatively speaking. Again, don't let that discourage you. I promise there's a good side to this. So what does that mean? Well, first off, it means that the majority of things that we're consciously aware of and trying to control, like training volume, like how many sets and reps we do, range of motion, how many days a week do I work a muscle group, on the dietary side, artificial sweeteners good or bad for us, seed oils, macronutrient ratios. These are the things that are superficial on the surface that we're aware of and we're trying to control. By and large, that stuff, even under the best of circumstances, is a relatively small influence on those fundamental processes. Therefore, a relatively small influence on your overall health and fitness. So when it comes to application, where some people are like, gosh, I do everything, nothing seems to work very much. It's like, yes, this is because most of the things that you can't control and a lot of the things that are under the surface in your subconscious behavior are running against or out of alignment with your results. So yeah, all the stuff you're consciously trying to do, like the diet and the exercise stuff, is a small influence trying to go one way. Meanwhile, you've got mountains of other influences fighting you. So to those who are like, I feel like I'm just fighting my body and fighting life and fighting everything against me, you're absolutely right. You're 100% correct. You know, when people say, why is it so much easier for this person to get and stay lean? Why is it so much easier for this person to build muscle? And a lot of people with the ego will say, it's not easier. I just know what I'm doing. Da, 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 da. No, it 100% is easier. Okay. Like, case in point for me, like, I'm building muscle. I've stayed and been lean relative my entire life. I guarantee you it is 100% a hell of a lot easier for me to do this than for someone who is perpetually struggling. The reason why I'm successful to the degree that I have, it's because it's just easier for me, largely due to just dumb luck, because I just happen to have a lot of influences working in alignment with my goals. However, there are absolutely a lot of things that have worked against me in a big way, in a very big way. And I won't go into details or anything, but I've been fighting my body in life as much as many other people in order to get results too. So one, be forgiving of yourself and those around you. A lot of us have it a heck of a lot harder due to no fault of yourself and no fault of their own. Okay. It's not like, well, they're just lazy or they lack willpower or they're dumb or ignorant. No, it's literally because the majority of things that are going on under the surface are working against their ability to do that. And there's, to a large degree, nothing they can be aware of or do anything about right now. And if you happen to be one of those lucky individuals who has things working for you, good job, appreciate it, but no, that's the scenario. But not all is lost. You're like, well, what's the point of even trying then? Here's the thing, is it is possible to rewrite your subliminal source code to a large degree. It is possible to do these things. And when you do that, then you take a lot of those habits and behaviors and feelings that are running in the background against you, and you basically say, no, 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 not that way. Go this way. Go in this direction. I want to go this way. And it takes work, and it takes focus, and it takes time. But when you do it and you get them oriented in the direction you want to go, then you don't have to do any more of a lot of the work. You just take your hands off and be like, okay, go. And now all of those habits and subliminal things running in the background that were fighting you, now they're working for you. Now they're working in your best interest. And it's 24/7, my friends. So instead of fighting your subliminal feelings and habits and everything that are working against you, now they're working for you. It is possible to do that. And I'll get into a little bit more of how we can do that here in a little bit, answer some more questions. But it is possible. But like I said, it takes some work, and it takes kind of an open mind, if you will, because it takes challenging your perspectives, my friend. Not just what do you know and intellectually about diet and exercise and things, but how do you think fitness works? How do you think or feel about exercise? Because when you change how you feel, I've talked about emotional conditioning in the past. When you change that, you change your life, you change your body, you change everything. And that's what I'm trying to do here, especially with the Beautiful Strength program, because that's based on the fundamental nature of fitness. And just that alone changes how we behave and feel about things in fitness. But it takes an open mind. Because if I come on a, podcast platform and I'm like, yeah, I don't really worry too much about sugar. I like sugar. I eat it all the time. I love sugar. It's great. I did that with a buddy of mine a few months ago. He's like, you don't avoid sugar? I'm like, nah, I like sugar. I like sugar. I make sure I get enough of it every day. And you could see like the gears grinding in his brain. He was like, what? No, dude, what the hell are you talking about? What are you, stupid? What are you, crazy? Don't you know it's the worst thing for you? I'm like, no, man, it's the best thing for you. It's awesome. I love it. It is fantastic. And he's like, I can't, no. And I was like, okay, let me put it in context here for you, because I was kind of messing with him a little bit. I was like, basically, sugar is one of the most purest forms of refined carbohydrate and therefore energy we can have. So it's just straight up rocket fuel for the body. Do we need it? Are we good with a lot of it? No, of course, it's overconsumption of it that's problematic. But is it in and of itself a bad thing? No, of course not. It is literally what we have evolved to use. That's why we love sweet things. That's why we have literally developed everything from our gut bacteria to our taste buds to everything to the smell of fruit and everything is like, oh, I love that. I don't know anybody who's ever said, I hate the smell of fruit. Like, we have literally evolved over time to love sugar because it's awesome. But now we have scenarios where we can have, sugar bombs from a can of soda that our body's like, whoa, I'm not able to handle this all that well. And that's where the problem is. We have to be particular of what the actual issue is. It's not sugar. It's the fact that we can consume more of it in 5 minutes than our body can healthily handle in a day, kind of thing. But that's what I'm talking about, is we have to shift our frameworks and our perspectives and our feelings to a degree, which is hard to do. But if we're open to it, then we can get into our subliminal thoughts kind of like lifting up the hood in a car, saying like, oh boy, that part is not looking good. And then you fix the part, and while you're fixing it, you're aware of it. You're thinking about the bolts and the nuts, and that belt needs to be over here and everything. But then you put it back in the engine, close the hood, and then next time you drive your car, you're not even thinking about that part. You just drive. But now that part isn't fighting you anymore. The brakes aren't rubbing and causing you problems on your way to your destination. Now it's working for you rather than against you. And that's why, yeah, more or less volume, great. Adding some fruit to your breakfast, great. Protein at each meal, awesome. These superficial things are great to focus on and stuff. But unless we get into the subliminal things that govern most of our behaviors, we're either going to be fighting or working with a lot of the stuff that is either in alignment or against our goals. And that can be challenging. That's not easy to do, but it is incredibly empowering when it does happen. My man Joseph with his workout update. Let's see how you doing here, sir. Yesterday I did push-ups with my feet elevated 8 inches off the floor. I've not done those push-ups for a long time. In 2 sets, very good. The second set, I did a drop to the floor and kept doing the push-ups. Yeah, drop sets, fantastic, Joseph. Well done. So a lot of times in the push-up world, we'll elevate our feet. Sometimes people call these decline push-ups or incline push-ups, right? And this is basic progressive calisthenics 101. Because remember, progressive calisthenics training is just another form of weightlifting. And your primary way of adding or decreasing resistance is adding or decreasing weight. That's why when people say body weight training isn't the same as weightlifting, I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course it's the same thing. You're the weight. I'm like, well, you don't add weight. Well, sure you do. Because most of your technical advancement is all about adding weight to your working muscles by changing it from one part of your body to the next. So this is a great example. When my man Joseph said, I put my feet up on an elevated surface, what you do is when you elevate your feet, you are literally shifting weight off your feet and putting more weight on your hands. So you added weight to your hands. It's no different than holding heavier dumbbells in your hands. Same thing. You're adding weight. So yeah. And so then when he got close to, those hard reps and he's like, drop set, and he put his feet down, he shifted weight off of his hands onto his feet. So it's the same thing as doing like a chest press machine. And then you just select the pen up a plate or two and you keep going. Drop set. Wonderful. Great job, Joseph. Wonderful training set. On the second set, no less. Love it. Chef's kiss, man. That was fantastic. So that's a good example of how he's getting a lot more volume, not a whole lot more sets. It's just a little bit of something specially tacked on, a little bit of extra to ensure that he's getting into those hard reps, potentially creating a stronger stimulus for hypertrophy. Wonderful. Wonderful job. Oh, hey, everything but the gym. Fantastic. Good to see you. Fantastic. Good to see you as well, my friend. Good job. Wasatch Wizard is in the house too. Good to see everybody. A couple of names I haven't seen in a while. Hope everybody is doing very well. So we covered quite a few different topics here today, and I know I kind of sped through quite a bit of this. I'm going through a lot of growth and development here for RDP. I've got a lot of really big, interesting things coming down the pipeline and new things coming for you this year and into next year. I'm already planning things for next year that's going to make the whole approach to everything we do a lot clearer, a lot easier to understand, and a lot more focused. And I'm very excited about it, that the changes that are going to be coming for all of you folks. But the bottom line is that when we run into a training variable like volume, recognize that it can be useful in certain contexts, but we don't want to be too beholden to that one thing as the be-all, end-all solution to what we have. And sometimes it's easy to fool ourselves into that, where someone may be doing like a relatively low volume training approach, and then they add volume, they start building muscle, and they're like, oh, that's the answer, volume. It's all about the volume. And so they went from 2 sets to 4 sets to 5 to 6 to 7, and they're chasing volume because they're like, yeah, the intensity doesn't matter very much. And the range of motion doesn't matter very much. I don't need to push to failure. So they're basically taking a lot of these other variables, which were also very important, and saying, I'm going to forget about all that stuff and focus on this one thing. And this is the trap that we often fall into, is that our result that we're looking for is never about one thing. It's not volume, it's not intensity, it's not protein, it's not sugar, it's not calories in, it's not cardio, it's not 100 other things that we can get hyper fixated on. It's always about a holistic approach. And you change one variable, and yeah, that can have a positive influence on that fundamental process that does govern your results. Great, awesome, but that doesn't mean the other stuff isn't important. So yes, that's good. Volume, modify it for sure. Sugar, eat less of it, feel better. Okay, great. Does that mean that's the whole story? Absolutely not. But that happens a lot because we think, okay, that's the thing. I'm going to ignore everything else. But then we're setting ourselves up for compensation. Okay, I cut out sugar, so I'm going to eat a ton of calories from butter and more saturated fat. Or, okay, I've focusing on volume, so intensity and range of motion and technique and everything goes right out the window. All that stuff is still very much important. It's all important. The important question to ask ourselves is, important in what context, or how important is it? Because remember, a lot of that stuff that's very top of mind and easy to focus on is the superficial stuff at the very top of the iceberg. Yeah, it's important, but probably not that important. It's probably not entirely responsible for your results, even though you change that one thing and you start to see some feedback and get some positive benefits from it, doesn't mean that's the one thing. And that's why a multi-influential approach is the saner, more effective, and less stressful way to go, is when you look at a number of variables and you keep those under control. And you're like, yeah, of course volume matters, as does intensity, as does technique, as does programming, as does sleep, as does protein, as does 100 other variables. Doesn't mean you need to be consciously working at 100 things, because remember, most of them are just working on subconscious autopilot in the background. And that's how it's supposed to be. And then you might take one thing and be like, well, let me focus on this for a little bit and see if I can improve it and upgrade. Okay, good. I'm all right. I don't need to focus on that so much anymore, kind of thing. And that's how we can break out of our, little prisons that we're stuck in. It's like, focus on something, improve it a little bit. Okay, good. Then you get it into habitual autopilot. And you don't necessarily completely ignore it, but you're like, yeah, I'm not going to pay too much attention to that anymore. I'm going to focus on this thing now. And that's how you can really level things up. Because if you're not really focusing on any one thing, then you're kind of not focusing on anything, really. As I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and we made the joke of like, how many priorities do you have? And he's like, if the answer is anything other than one, you don't have any priorities. Because you're just too scatterbrained. You've got all of your eggs in too many baskets. You want to have at least a little bit here and there all over the place. And when you're like, okay, let me see what happens when I put more eggs in the volume basket. I'm not taking them all into that one, but some eggs in the volume basket. Okay, that made something. Okay, take some back out. Let's see about the range of motion. Let's really go for range of motion for the next month. Focus on that. Okay, good. Okay, take them out. We can move our attention and focus around, which again gives you empowerment and is very educational about those sorts of things. So yeah, start off with the 2 sets as your standard. Add volume sporadically if you want to level things up, or not. Again, you can adjust your volume through adding exercises, not necessarily just sets on each one. And make sure that you keep pushing close to failure or challenging your work capacity as the goal in your training when you're training for hypertrophy and trying to build muscle. That's where you want to keep your focus. Adjust all the other variables when you like that sort of thing. Oh, very good experience here. Wasted 5 years of training. I would say not. There's no such thing as wasted training, but still. Trying to rush progressive overload in expense of crappy form. Right. Now I'm staying with the same weight for weeks, mastering it before increasing weight. Very smart way to go about it. Okay? So yeah, there's no such thing as wasted training. We always get something from it because all training produces a stimulus to some degree in some way. So it's not like there's such a thing as ineffective training. But yeah, so it's pushing the progressive overload. here. Good. There are definitely times to do that. Absolutely. The whole idea of like, well, how do you get stronger? Just put more weight on the bar. There's a time and a place for that. Just keep pushing that overload of I'm assuming with your form of progressive overload here is adding resistance. There is a time and a place for that, but as long as it's temporary. Like I'm going to push this for 6 weeks, then I'm going to stop pushing it. And then you do like you're saying now. Now you're focusing on form. Okay, so I like this strategy. Is what I like to call freeze training from time to time, where I'll tell a client, like, you're not allowed any more weight, any more reps, stay there. So this is in the Beautiful Strength program, what happens when both sets are the same number. Like you get 2 sets of 10 pull-ups, but those last few repetitions are not exactly the best, and you don't add reps until you can get more reps on the second set. So what that does is it keeps you in this little zone where you're forced to focus on technique. Well, I got 10 reps on the second set, but range of motion's kind of shallow on those last couple reps. Okay, let's improve that repetition. Maybe my legs are kicking around to get those last couple of reps. Okay, let's keep your heels together and keep your body a little quieter on those last reps. Remember that whenever you're doing your sets, notice your technical erosion. How is your technique falling apart between your first set and your last set? What changes? If you don't notice it, look in the mirror or have someone record you on video. You're going to learn a lot by watching it on video. And then whatever that is, that's the thing to improve for you. That's the thing you personally need to improve upon. And then once you get that, then you can add the weight in the reps and things like that. And so that's how we can do that with freeze training, is you focus on the technique as opposed to the weight and repetitions. Very smart way to go about it. Very, very intelligent. So, but the other thing you talked about here that I wanted to bring up, like I said, like you want to have something where you're focusing on like a periodized plan where you're saying, I'm going to spend a month or 6 weeks or whatever your training block is, focusing on making progress in this way. Okay. Now he did that very well, and I'm sure it worked great for at first on progressive overload, adding resistance. Awesome. Wonderful. I'm sure that was effective at first. As they say, everything works, nothing works forever. So what happened there was he's like, progressive overload, like I was saying earlier, that's the answer. Boom, and go. But the challenge was, he was saying, that's what I'm going to put my eggs in that basket, and I'm going to neglect other things and compromise it. And that's when, we have increase of risk of burnout and injury and all these other sorts of things. So that's why it's good to focus on improving or really pushing something hard. Just make it temporary. And that's why periodization can work, because it's not so much it's telling you to focus on something, it's telling you to stop focusing on it. It's like focus on it for 6 weeks, then stop focusing on it, and then focus on technique, or volume, or range of motion, or whatever, right? So we have selected blocks of focus, and the other things we're doing, we're still doing it. We're just maintaining that. So that way you can level on up in a bit of a sprint there. So there's a lot to take away from that. That was fantastic. Oh, I know exactly what you mean. So he's following up saying it's crazy. I'm only doing 3x6 pull-ups with this form after 5 years of training. Well, don't be too with crappy form. I was pulling 20 kilograms with the 3x6. He was with body weight. This is the thing that's interesting about focusing on technique, though, is you start to embrace what I like to call mechanical inefficiency. And usually when it comes to building strength and muscle, mechanical inefficiency is a good thing, because it basically you're doing the exercise the hard way. Usually an increase in range of motion, improving tension control, keeping the muscles engaged, moving at a tempo so you're not using momentum, things like that, right? And suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, this is really, really hard. I've got videos where, early RDP videos, where I was like, do push-ups this way. And people in the comments are like, oh my gosh, I could do 75 push-ups. Now I'm struggling to do 12. Like, what the hell? It's like, yeah, now you do it the hard way. And I tell that to clients all the time. We're doing things the hard way. Because when we make things mechanically inefficient, that usually makes it a lot easier to create the stimulus that we want, particularly for strength and hypertrophy. Now, if you came to me with a different scenario where you're like, I'm not interested in strength or muscle, I just want a passive push-up contest, or in your case, a pull-up contest, I'd say, yeah, use your crappy form. Because the goal is different. The goal is I got to be able to do 20 pull-ups in a row or whatever to pass a PT test. Be like, yeah, definitely use the worst form. Because the goal is not muscle and strength. The goal is getting 20 reps so you can pass your test. Different goals, different objectives, different processes. We want to go after different things. So when we are using different techniques, we want to make sure of, again, the nuance to it, of when does this apply? When does it not apply? When is crappier form better? When is it worse? And then we can make the selective decision on this better in this scenario, it's worse in this scenario. The screwdriver is better here, the hammer is better over here. And then you become a technician and you have much more of a proficiency of training much more effectively, not just getting locked into, this is always better, do it this way. This is always worse, don't do it that way. Nuance, context, my friends. You don't have power, empowerment, and choice in either case when it's always good or always bad. But when you're like, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, depends on the scenario, depends on the objective, which I know scares people. We love those simple TikTok, goldfish attention span answers where it's like, just tell me what to do real quick, 5 seconds, go. And it's like, I can give you instructions, but it's not going to do you any good. Because when we get those fortune cookie answers, it's devoid of nuance, and that you might as well just still be ignorant that way. You just might as well not learn anything, because using the wrong tool in the right scenario, or the right tool in the wrong, or in the right scenario, it's still going to produce a bad result. And this is why a lot of times when sometimes people will come to me and they're like, when I started this whole health and fitness journey thing, like I didn't know jack squat, and I got great results because I just did the stuff that seems stupid to do. It's like, well, I took a walk every day and I didn't eat too much processed junk food, and I focused on getting protein and good night's sleep. And if I felt stronger, I put more weight on the bar. And if I wasn't as strong, I just didn't do as much weight that day or whatever. It's like, I just did that and I got great results. And people are like, yeah, it's your beginner and kind of thing. It's like, oftentimes it's because we're not learning so much that we end up on Mount Stupid in the Dunning-Kruger effect, where we basically distract ourselves from what we're really supposed to be doing because we've trying to science our way into the perfect body, when a lot of those things really aren't all that important. They're the superficial details at the top of the iceberg. And when we're basically just looking at ourselves and saying, what can I do to just be better? And we're self-observing and we're looking for opportunities in daily life. We're working more on that subliminal level of like, well, I don't know, what can I do to just be healthier today? If you start looking at your life and your habits and you're like, what can I do to just be better off? You're going to find the big stuff that's going to make a much bigger difference. And you don't need to go on the internet combing through Reddit forums trying to be like, should I do 12 reps or 10 reps? And, is it 3 sets or 4 sets better and stuff? And we get lost in the details trying to science our way there. And it's just, at the end of the day, it's not that important. And that's how you get the guys, 60 years old, jacked as hell at the local park. And it's like, how are you jacked? I was like, oh, I just do pull-ups when I feel like it. Well, how many do you do? Until I get tired. It's like, what? How is that working so much? Meanwhile, we've got like 5 apps and 6 activity trackers and all this technology on our body, and we can't seem to lose those last 5 pounds. And this guy's like, no, I don't know. I just ate a whole lot of vegetables, and I lost the weight kind of thing. Sometimes a little ignorance is a good way to go about it. Oh, yeah, Paul Bruce. Good to see. Yes, I posted a video in addition to the one on the hypertrophy on a little resistance band isometric workout because isometrics are really good with resistance bands if the bands are heavy enough. So Paul is saying video posted yesterday on resistance band isometrics was awesome. Thank you very much, Paul. How they are a combination of yielding and overcoming. Spot on. Yeah, it's a very good thing because when we are practicing isometrics, because I'm currently writing the outline for my second isometrics book, the both yielding and overcoming isometrics have their pros and cons, but sometimes we have the ability to do both. I call it a hybrid isometric. And when we have both yielding and hybrid, that's when things get really interesting. And when we look at old school isometric training in the old York isometric racks with the barbells, that's how it was. You had a given amount of resistance for the yielding portion, but then you were pushing that resistance against an immovable pin in the rack for the overcoming aspect of it. And we can do the same thing with resistance bands. And it's surprisingly hard, surprisingly effective, but very good for that muscle pump too. So the video is up now on the Red Delta Project YouTube channel. The whole workout takes you like 10 minutes. It's one of the great things about isometrics. I selected the exercises specifically to be done largely with one band, a heavy one. You're not going to do it with like one of those little TheraBands or one of the ones with the handles at each end. You need a good sized band for it, but you should be able to do most of those exercises with one band or maybe a couple of them and stuff. So you don't need a ton of them. Really good for when you're traveling too, because it's really easy to travel with one band. You get a whole bunch of them and suddenly you're taking up most of the space in your carry-on with rubber bands. It's particularly designed to be very space, cost, and energy efficient for that. So anyway, go in and check it out. Oh, Tim Toons, good to see it. Best results I ever got was due to your grind style approach. Then you're going to love what's coming down the pipe, my friend. But burned out pretty quick. It is a bit harsh, yeah. For example, after 3 sets of archer push-ups and pistols, I had no energy left for pulling. Yeah, that is one of the things to be mindful of, particularly with the progressive calisthenics approach, where you're working one limb at a time. Because when you work one leg or primarily one arm at a time, it is a big energy drain for sure. So that's why some of the nuances to some of the changes that I'm making in the next year or so are going to help address this sort of thing. And I think you're going to like it a little bit more as far as not draining you too much. Because yeah, the original grind style calisthenics workouts were quite a bit more energy intensive. And fair point, I wrote the program during a period of my life when I had a lot of time and a lot of energy. So I think I unconsciously, again, a lot of stuff was going on subliminal autopilot, unconsciously wrote a program that was very energy intensive, which is great and really good for producing results, but it doesn't have a whole lot of adaptability for those who are like, I've got 10 minutes, what can I do? Kind of approach. And there's grind style approaches we can fit into that, but the general way it's laid out in the book is not conducive for that sort of thing there. But yeah, glad you like the grind style approach. Like I said, you're gonna like what's coming down the pipe. Let's see, other questions coming in quick here. Thanks, folks. Follow up, what do you think about this exercise selection for a single workout? All right, program assessment. Let's see, weighted chin-ups and dips. All right, there off the bat, very good. Bodyweight rows, shrugs, lateral raises, and neck curls. Oh, I like this approach. Very, very good. You got a couple of big compound fundamental movements right off the bat. Bodyweight rows, awesome. Shrugs, lateral raises, neck curls. So the only thing I would look at, if you're looking to save a little bit of time and energy here, is incorporate your shrugs with the lateral raises. So when you lift up the dumbbell, shrug at the same time. Because a lot of times shrugs they seem very targeted, but in my experience, speaking as someone who used to shrug a whole lot of times it's hard to target those upper traps with a really heavy bar in your hands, because of, that kind of pulls you forward, a kyphotic posture. So if you're not able to retract your shoulders at the same time you're pulling up, which is hard to do with enough of the weight that you usually use with shrugs, it's usually a more stress and less stimulus type of scenario. In most cases, I don't know how you're doing it, but that's my experience in working with people with it. But if you're getting a scapular elevation with, again, mechanical inefficiency, which is the lateral raise, you're typically going to create a stronger stimulus with less stress on the joints. Just make sure with this lateral raise, you're not doing like, 25-pound dumbbells and stuff. Start off with I'm dead serious, 3 to 5 pounds. Lock those arms out, shoulders are back, lift the arm up, and then shrug at the very top. See if you can get that burn in the traps from that. I'm willing to bet that's going to kill two birds, one stone. And because your traps are helping with your deltoids and vice versa, I'm willing to bet you're going to get better results by combining them rather than having the two exercises. And then the neck curls, use your upper traps for that as well, because your upper traps feed into your neck. So you want to make sure your upper traps and your neck are working in conjunction with one another. And that way you're going to get more of a broad stimulus for your upper traps, and your neck and your lateral delts will probably have more out of those exercises as well. All right. Weights and calisthenics mix, very good. Yep, absolutely. This is the beautiful thing, particularly about building muscle. We've got so many different ways we can do it. There's no good reason to force yourself into a dogmatic ideology. None. If you're like, well, I like to mix weights with calisthenics, awesome. I want to only use isometrics. Great. Do whatever you want. We have so much freedom at our fingertips, but we love to just pen ourselves into our own like restrictive approaches because we somehow feel it's best or the right proper way to do it. And at the end of the day, it's just what's best and most proper for you. Gromit is asking any suggestions for upper lower split on isomax glute dominant on isomax glute dominant. Let me see here. Not entirely sure what you're asking, but let me take a shot at it. Suggestions for upper lower body split on the isomax. Oh, with glute dominant. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so basically you want to think of like push pull superset. Let's see, on the isomax, how would we rip this? Let's see. I'm trying to think of what we can do with the minimum amount of height adjustment in the handle, because that can be a little bit tricky. So you're going to have upper body one day, lower body the next. So upper body, we're going to have our push and our pull. So here's what I would do. First superset is going to be seated row bicep curl, because you're going to have the handle for roughly the same height for both of those exercises. I put it on pocket number 9 myself. Could be 10 or 8 for what you need or whatever, but do that. Do 2 sets or 2 holds of a seated row with, with the plate is against your feet and you're sitting on the floor. 2 sets of that, 2 sets of curls. Okay, then do it again. 2 hold, 2 curls kind of thing. Go with the feedback mode at first, and then just see what you're recording for a max amount of load for the first couple of weeks. Don't use the load mode, don't use the time mode, other than to just use as a timing mechanism if you don't have a clock. So 2 sets row, 2 set curl, 2 sets row, 2 set curl. Then you go into your standing chest press. Okay, so you're gonna have, that's gonna get your shoulders, chest, triceps. You're gonna have 3 sets of that, and then 3 sets of the overhead press for your triceps. That's your upper body day. Okay, that's your push-pull upper body. Then for day 2, that's lower body. What you're going to be doing is, oh, I love this combination. This is beautiful. You're going to have single leg or kickstand deadlift. Okay, so you're going to have the bar roughly at about shin height or just below your knee, and you're going to do kickstand deadlift. So you're going to have all your weight primarily on one foot. The foot is going lengthwise along the platform. So if you've got the strap underneath and coupled on your foot is underneath the strap. So you're going to have that for glute and hamstring dominant is the kickstand deadlift. I've got, if you search Isomax workouts on my channel, you may be able to find some examples of this. So you're going to have that back and forth 3 times. Right leg, left leg, right leg, left leg, right leg, left leg. Again, strength, keep the numbers low, 6 to 10 seconds. Hypertrophy, 15, 20 seconds or so. Then you're not going to move the bar. You're going to go with a hack squat. So this is where you're going to stand on the platform. Feet are on both sides. Bar is behind your calves. And you're going to have your hands down below, kind of like a trap bar deadlift kind of deal, but you're going to sink your hips down real low. So it's more of a squat type motion rather than deadlift motion, but you're still going to use a lot of your glutes with that as well. That way you're using your glutes for both the kickstand deadlift and the hack squat. And there you go for your lower body train. So that's 2 exercises. Get 3 to 4 holds on each of those, and that's your lower body split. So it's a little imbalanced as far as the exercise portion goes. If you want to make the upper body a little faster, don't do the curls and triceps. Just get those muscles involved with the row and the standing chest press on that. So hopefully that all makes sense. I know there was a lot to describe it there, but see if that goes well for you. Good question here. Cole is asking, what do you see any difference between mindset and motivation? Find mindset to be redundant. What are your thoughts? Mindset, I find, is one of those subjective terms that we love to throw around in the self-help areas that kind of doesn't mean anything. It's like, you got to have the right mindset, got to have a good mindset, got to have a strong mindset, got to have a disciplined mind. What do I do with that? Like, like, how do I, it's the same thing with attitude. Coaches used to tell you got to have a good attitude, a strong attitude, all this stuff. Okay. Now what? Like, what do I do with that? It doesn't tell me anything. The reason why I always talk about motivation is that we can do that. We can modify motivation. Motivation is down to a very simple formula. It's perceived cost to perceived benefits. When the costs are low, benefits are high, we have motivation. We can engineer motivation on a scientific and measurable and quantifiable level, even if it is subjective, like, I don't know, I just like working out at this gym, right? Okay, but there's a benefit, right? That's something that we enjoy. That makes it more worthwhile. So mindset is kind of, woo-woo kind of approach. It is worthwhile, though, to just observe your thoughts, observe your feelings about things. In the old Bruce Lee quote, don't think, feel. Observe your feelings. Observe how you feel about something. I hate this exercise. I don't like doing this thing. I don't feel good when I walk in this gym. Pay attention to that stuff. Pay attention to that and be like, okay, so you don't like that gym. Is there a different gym you can go to? You don't like this exercise. Every time I have a client say, I don't like this exercise, I'm like, great, awesome. Why? Don't just sweep it under the proverbial rug and be like, well, I don't like doing it, but I'm supposed to do it. No, there could be a very good reason why you don't like this exercise. You're supposed to like what you're doing to at least some degree. So if you don't like doing something, that's an invitation to be like, why? There could be something we need to address here. And when people come to me and they're like, I hate doing push-ups. I'm like, well, let me see your push-ups. And they do it with their neck forward and their elbows winging out and they're doing the worm on the floor practically. I'm like, yeah, I'd hate doing the push-ups if I did them like that too. I don't tell them that, but it's like, yeah, there could be a very good reason why we don't like it. Let's fix that so you do like it, kind of idea. So yeah, mindset, I would say, is kind of largely overrated. It doesn't really apply to anything. It doesn't give us anything. Focus on the motivation. Focus on things that are worthwhile. Sometimes it can point us in a direction to say that you don't really want what you think you want. Sometimes when people are like, I don't like lifting the heavy weights and things like that, it's like, well, what do you want? I want to be strong. I want to be really, really strong and things. But then you start really peeling back the layers of what they actually want. I'm like, you don't want to be strong. You just want to feel good. Well, yeah, I don't want, to be so tired at the end of a day of work. And I don't want to be so, aches and pains and a sore lower back every time that's what you want. You don't care about being strong. You just want to have good energy. You want to feel better. Yeah, so, well, that's a totally different thing. If we just keep chasing weight on the bar, that could actually hurt the very goal that you're after. So when you have more attention to your feelings, they direct you if you're going in the right direction or not. And if anything, there's your mindset. It's just, where's the compass needle going? That's why I always talk about the fundamental objectives in fitness. Things like challenging your muscular work capacity, eat to satisfy, things like that. It's like, well, it doesn't tell me much. No, but it gets you mentally thinking about where you're going, because the human subconscious is extremely powerful for helping us get the thing that we're focusing on, much to our detriment a lot of times. And I certainly experience this a lot of times when we're working out. We assume, well, if I just drive myself into the ground and make myself exhausted and burned out, that's going to be a good workout. So you make exhaustion your goal, not a stimulus. You don't care if you're actually doing things well or right in the workout. You don't care about the stimulus you're creating. You just want to drive yourself into the ground, which is actually a really easy thing to do, relatively speaking. So when your goal is exhaustion, you don't know that, oh, you can get a much more powerful stimulus for building muscle with half the work. But then even if I told you that, you wouldn't be interested, because you don't actually want to build muscle. You want to just exhaust yourself. You've made exhaustion your goal. So we have a very, very powerful ability to get the thing that we actually want, that we're orienting our mindset towards. And then when we recognize it's like, oh, maybe it's orienting towards the wrong target, then that's an opportunity for growth, because you'll never become successful if you get really good at hitting the wrong target. I did that one time at an archery range. They had this contest going on, and I spent like half the morning shooting at a certain target and got really good at it, relatively speaking. And then they're like, okay, archer's ready. And my friend was like, where are you aiming? I'm like, over there. He's like, no, the target's over there. I'm like, damn it. I got all that work all morning to get good at hitting the wrong target. And of course I sucked. I was like, oh, I hit the wrong target. That's often what happens in fitness. We get really good at the wrong target. So that's why I talk about fundamental objectives and things like that. I want to orient your mindset towards a better target, because it's going to be a lot easier to get results. You're going to get far better results, and it's going to be a lot less stressful on body, mind, and lifestyle. So that moves right on in with the question from, again, Tim, saying you talked about your difficulties on food and training. Yes, very much. Same here. How did you overcome the anxiety? Well, again, a lot of it, well, first off, you got to understand that your anxiety is just flat out lying to you. It's the boogeyman in the closet. It's the monster under your bed. It is flat out just lying to you. It is not real. So when we start to understand that, we can start to question it. You question your anxiety a little bit. So for example, back in the day when I had a lot of like disordered eating habits and stuff like that, I had a lot of fear around food, a lot of fear-based approaches to food and things like that. But then I started to get around people who not forced me, but they basically were like, why do you think this food is a bad thing? It's like, well, because it's got this fat and it's got the sugar and it's got the chocolate and everything. I'm like, so? Like, it has this benefit to it. It has that benefit to it. It has this. So basically, it just created a little cracks in my understanding, how I felt about it. So it just made me question it a little bit. When you start to question your beliefs and that are causing the anxiety, then you have the door open for other things. And then I started to learn more of like, no. Your diet's not healthy just because you don't eat a candy bar. It's healthy based on how much you satisfy your fundamental appetites need to satisfy. Sometimes you can do that by including a candy bar on occasion. And suddenly I was like, oh, here are the benefits to eating that candy bar. And because my mindset, I guess you could say, the compass needle shifted, I was no longer afraid or anxious about eating a candy bar anymore. And funny enough, as soon as I did that, I hardly ever wanted to eat candy bars anymore. It's like every day was a battle. Like, oh my gosh, like, all I want to do is just eat candy bars all day long. I just want to eat nothing but candy bars and everything. But as soon as I was like, no, you can eat it whenever you want. It's beneficial, for achieving, your hedonic appetites to food. And then I'd eat like, a fun-sized Snickers. I'm like, I'm good. I'm done, and that's empowering. That was good. No more food anxiety, because I changed my orientation on how I felt about the foods, about what the food actually was doing to my body and what it wasn't doing. And that all of the fears that I had of like, oh, you eat that, you're going to get fat. Oh, you eat that, you're going to be unhealthy. No, it's lying to you. It's not true. It's not true. And that's one of the reasons why right now I'm reading a book. What is this? What is this book called? Um, this is Making the American Body. I love the history of fitness. The remarkable saga. Oh shoot! I just basically one of the interests that I have in fitness is the history of fitness. How did we get here, kind of thing. One of the things that's gloriously beautiful as a lesson to learn about the history of fitness is it's almost entirely made up BS. Almost everything we know about how health and fitness works is just made up marketing mumbo jumbo. Not to say the scientific research and everything is not legitimate, of course. We know a lot more now than we did 10 years ago. But the fact of the matter is that most of our beliefs and orientations that we have, our emotional orientation, if you will, if you want to call mindset that, about food and exercise and how things work, is largely bro science mumbo jumbo at best. At best, a lot of our beliefs would be better if they were bro science, because a lot of them actually come from things of like racial prejudice and religious bigotry and things of that nature. There is so much carryover in our fitness culture from literally witch hunt based thoughts and beliefs that it's so much just fluff and mumbo jumbo. And when we understand that, then that again, that empowers us because it gives us the ability to basically mess the hell out of fitness. When I do my own things and I've got my own terms and my own approaches and my own methods and things like that, I don't even use the word chin up. To me, it's all pull ups because Paul Wade in combat conditioning said it's all pull-ups just with different grips. Like, yeah, I like that kind of idea, kind of thing. And people will sometimes question me, like, you can't just make this stuff up or do it your own way. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's all made up. It's all people doing it their own way. There is no overlord in fitness. There is no authoritarian regime and burning bushes that are delivering workout programs to us. It's all made up, which is great because that means we can do what we want and we can do things our own way. And if we want to mess with it, we're absolutely within our right and ability to do so. And if we want to do things a different way, you have every ability and permission to do that. I was like, don't I have to do it this way or that way? Probably not. And that's one of the big lessons that I always want to impart to folks. If there's something about your approach in diet and exercise that you really don't want to do, chances are very good you don't have to do it. So it's like, I don't want to give up my candy bars. I don't want to have to do this or that. And it's like, great, don't. You're probably better off doing something else. Paul Bruce following up saying, can I hop on that anxiety train? Do you ever experience anxiety in training or see that in clients? Oh, very often, yes. Maybe they had an injury in the past and tense up when starting an exercise. How do you do it? Oh, yeah, this is something that does come up. I've worked with several individuals who had a history of very sedentary living. And for whatever reason, they got it in their mind that they felt like as soon as they start pushing their body even a little bit, they're going to hurt themselves. That they're just like it was so hard for me to really push them in an exercise because they would be doing like push-ups on the kitchen counter and stop and they'd be like, there's no way I could do more. That's it. And, that was my max. And with my experience, I'm like, okay, that was good effort, but I guarantee you it wasn't even close to your max. And I just know that from experience because I have maxed out my body 3 times and I hope to hell I never do it again because it was that awful. So we almost never hit our limits, but just you watch them and they were not slowing down. They're not really grinding out reps and things like that. So what do? Repetitions, my friends, repetition. It's like, okay, yeah, we don't need to push it. You don't need to push it that hard. Just do another set, do another set, do another set. Oh, you're getting tired? Okay, relax, rest. And then the next day, okay, do a set, do a set, do a set. We become familiar with repetition. And so when you have repetitive exposure to something you're slightly uncomfortable with, over time, you become comfortable with it. And that's where repetition is the fundamental ingredient for conditioning. We can condition our body just as much as we can condition our mind and, yes, our emotions through the power of repetition. We don't force it, we don't grind it or anything like that. We just keep it going over and over and over. And before too long, they're like, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable. Hell, I'm almost bored with these countertop push-ups. I'm like, okay, you've been doing sets of 10. Let's do 15. I don't think I could do it. Well, give it a shot. But because they're bored with it and they're like, oh, I can push a little harder, then they get 15. And they're like, oh, I guess I can work a little bit more. I guess I can push. And then they get more comfortable and more used to it. So repetition is always the answer to conditioning outside of anxiety, outside of weakness, outside of fear. It's the whole idea of like you get exposed to something, you don't fear it quite as much because it becomes normal. Some people, they have anxiety about going to the gym. They're really afraid of going to the gym. But over time, they're like, yeah, I go to the gym, no big deal. Repetition. I used to be terrified about standing in front of a camera or huge amounts of anxiety. What did I do every day? I literally started off, I'm like, I'm just going to stand in front of the camera. I'm not going to hit record. I'm not going to do anything. And then, after about a week, I'd take the camera, those little flip cams back in the early 2000s, and I would set it up and hit record, and I just go about my day. It's like, I don't have to say anything. I don't have to do anything. I just have the camera and it's recording. And then, of course, it would, about 20 minutes later, I just erase it. Just get in front of the thing, just low exposure, comfortable, what you can barely manage. And then you just repetition. Then after a while, I'd turn it on and be like, hey guys, I don't know. I'm just going to talk about something, I guess. I don't really know what to say. Erase. And then after a while, I'm like, okay, I actually have something to tell you now. Then I would edit the video and I'm like, nah, I'm not going to post that. So it took some time, but repetition. And now I can stand in front of a camera, edit, and post on YouTube, and I don't even think twice about it. It's that repetition that gets you over the anxieties. Oh, very good. Tim Toons following up. Yes, my approach is quite different. Awesome. And I hear very much, don't have to do it this way or so for so long. Well, with experience, I know. No, you don't. Yeah, and that's the other thing to it. You're right. You're absolutely right, Tim. So we can lull ourselves into complacency too with a lot of things like, okay, I'm doing this thing this certain way, which is why sometimes, again, we talked earlier about going at an intensity for a period of time of like, let's see what you're capable of kind of thing. When someone's like, this is as heavy as I can lift on this machine. And sometimes I'll just give them like 5 more plates on the machine. It's like, see if you can lift it. I can't lift it. Prove me wrong. I get $10 says you can't, or you can, kind of thing. And they're like, holy crap, I could lift that. Yeah, now you know, kind of thing. Sometimes we just have to jump and build our wings on the way down and just see what we can do. And, I did that in bike racing when we were doing our training races in the summer. You had either 1, 2, 3, or 4 lap races that we would do. And my buddy and I started doing 1 lap races, and we're like, oh man, someday maybe we'll be able to do 2. And at the end of the summer, like, oh, we can barely do 2 laps. This is great. Okay, maybe in the next 5 or 6 years we'll be able to do 4 lap. That would be insane, wouldn't it? Yeah. Well, then we got into collegiate bike racing, and we realized we have to do 4 lap races now. We can't wait. We have to, and of course we get destroyed. We're absolutely terrible at it, but we did it. We could do it. And let me tell you, we got a lot faster real quick because of that jumping up. So sometimes, yeah, it just comes down to let's just bite off a bit more than we can chew and see what happens. And again, with the exposure to it, we got used to it. By the end of that summer, we're like, oh yeah, 4 laps. We got this. We could do this. We even beat people. Not many, but we were able to do it because of that repetition. Paul Bruce saying, for transparency, that question was totally for me. Absolutely. Bicep tendinitis. Ouch. Baker's cyst, even concussion in my history. Yeah, you got a lot of injuries. That makes sense. Makes me hesitant even as a trainer. So this is why it's important also to embrace comfort, my friends. That being comfortable when we are pushing ourselves is part of the deal. And one of the reasons why I can push myself so much harder with calisthenics than with weights. I don't need a spotter. I don't have a big weight or a bar over my chest. I don't have a bar on my back. I don't need to, be careful on having, like, can I get out of this exercise quick? Yeah, you just lay down after a hard set of push-ups. It's much more comfortable emotionally for me to push. I can do very heavy weighted dips, really grind it out because I know I just put my feet down and the set's over. That's all it takes. So when we have different exercises, you'll find that you can push harder when you actually embrace more comfort. What exercises are you more comfortable with doing? And you don't have to force yourself to do the things you're inherently uncomfortable doing. And that's why having those options is very good. All right, folks, it has been a full hour and a half. I know I've been talking your ear off and everything, but don't forget, I got that new isometric workout over at Red Delta Project YouTube channel, just posted yesterday. Let me know if you have further questions and stuff, but always a pleasure as always. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will talk to you, I think, next week. I'm trying to remember. I got a Taekwondo tournament coming up here in the near future. I don't think it's next weekend, so we'll probably be here next weekend, but otherwise, I will talk to you folks next time. Be fit, live free.